There we are. Okay, I want to show you all something really quick. Can I get NAG logo? What you see before you is the logo of the Negro Actors Guild of America. Again, the Negro Actors Guild of America. This was a real thing. You can take that down. So real that I want to show you something else. Can I get NAG proclamation? This is from the office of the mayor of the city of New York. There's whereas clauses, there's a little be it resolved, there's signature, there's a little stamp making it official. That's how impactful the Negro Actors Guild of America was. As a matter of fact, let's take it up one more. Can I get NAG Lyndon B. Johnson? Yes. This that you see before you is a letter from the then president of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson, acknowledging the work and accomplishments of the Negro Actors Guild. I want to show you one more thing. You're official. Nothing's really official. Don't you know how you're in high school? And your high school always has that fight song. For Loyola, I went to a school called Loyola Blakefield, and it's see our men in strong array, see them battle in the fray, cheer Loyola, triumph's yours today. It keeps going. Can I get NAG song? They had it. They had their own song. That's how impactful they were. They also, fun fact, we could take that down. Not only did they have their own theme song, their own song, but they also had a march song for the Negro Actors Guild of America. It was called NAGA, which is too close to MAGA, and I feel like we're all still recovering, so I omitted that today. But today, what we're going to do is we are going to break open a dissertation that was written in 1986 on the Negro Actors Guild, written by Dr. Jonathan Dewberry, who is here with us today. He has actually graced us to talk about the history of the Negro Actors Guild, which had a huge impact on so many of the unions that SAG-AFTRA, that is the Actors Equity Association, so many of the funds, for example, the Actor Fund, the Episcopal Actors Guild, even the AFL-CIO. And I personally believe that it was the Negro Actors Guild that paved the way for the Actors Equity Association's first Black president. This matters. Today matters. And if you're just joining the show, hello, this is the Receipts. This is where we examine issues and we figure out solutions every season. And if you are someone who's been regularly watching the show, this is no different. You know that a flip is happening. You know that this is all connected to everything we did in the past couple of episodes. So let's just get into it. I have asked for help from another delegate of the Actors Equity Association, someone who helped me write Article 9 of the Black Theater Matters bill, which just made its way through legal review. We're legit, y'all. Can we get Damian's intro?
The Receipts would like to give a warm welcome to today's co-host, Damian Jermaine Thompson, a classically trained stage, film, and television New York City-based actor, originally from Kingston, Jamaica, by way of Miami, Florida. The award-winning actor was honored at the 2018 NAACP Awards for his performance in Pasadena Playhouse's production of Fly, as well as the 2012 Grammy Awards, and has had the pleasure of performing for both the Obamas and the Clintons at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., and off-Broadway. His short film, Black, for which he wrote, produced, and co-starred in, was awarded Best Film at the New York Premiere Film Festival and was an official selection at other numerous festivals. You can catch him now in Pericles as Pericles on Zoom with Connecticut's Repertory Theater. Please welcome Davon's co-host, Damian Jermaine Thompson.
We made it. We did legal. We made it. We got it. Oh my God. If we can have confetti rain down on this show,
dude,
let's do it. The co-author of Article 9, how do you feel?
I am humbled. Thanks for having me. That intro video was beautiful. Like, that took me down memory lane. It was beautiful. Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm just happy. Okay, so here's something that I find very funny. I'm just going to get straight into it before we get into the Negro Actors Guild. Yes. We first met during the pandemic.
Yes.
In a split screen just like this.
Yes.
And what was so funny about it is I was doing all the other interviews and everyone's being all flowery and stuff like that and wasting no time. You not only were like, I want to get to the real stuff. I want to talk, like, these are the issues. Not only did you advocate for the closing of theaters that weren't paying their actors, which I was like, oh, go get it. But then you turned around and then read everybody else for being nice. And I was like, I hope he gets it. I hope he gets the most votes.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? This journey for me is not a journey of accolades or, titles, or I'm not trying to be president one day. I'm not trying to go up some ladder or something. Like, I'm here because, like, there are things that need to change, like we need to change. We need to be a better union for everyone. Yeah, I'm just here to speak some truth.
I hear that.
I'm not always perfect, right? But I'm striving for betterment.
As we all do. Here's something I find very funny. You gave a speech when we first met, and for everyone at home, Damian, Thompson, and I have been friends ever since.
Yeah,
we haven't.
That was like, I mean, seriously, like, speaking to you was like, I feel like I've known this guy like my whole life. Like, how have we not been friends? Like, this is insane. And we literally have been talking like at least 2 to 3 times a week ever since.
Indeed, like nonstop. However, back to that first time that we spoke, you were pretty much saying something that resonated with me. But then I saw, it was funny because when I was talking to other delegates or people who were running at the time, they were like, I don't know if that should be the forefront. Like, Fair Wage has already done that argument. And a lot of the stuff Damian was saying, I don't know if he's really been doing his homework. And I was laughing because I was so in your corner. And something happened recently. There's a woman named Kayla Peccioni. Now, when you see Kayla, you're not, because when I say Peccioni, I was like, oh, Italian. Because when someone gave me the name, I was like, what is this? Like, what happened? So for Black History Month, we've been doing this thing where we're highlighting Black women who are advocating for themselves. And Kayla Peccioni, it was almost as if she took your monologue and did it herself. So right now, not at the end of the show, not at the beginning of the show, but right now, because I want your response to what she's saying as a delegate, can we get Kayla Peccioni?
Very angry, so here it goes. You need to pay your performers. We are not making at all nearly enough of what, or nearly as much of what we used to make. And the offers that we keep getting for performances these days, virtual or live, socially distanced, they are lower and lower and lower. I had a theater company reach out to me last night asking me to audition for something for them, and for 2 rehearsals and the performance in total, they offered to pay me $20. I was supposed to have a performance gig tonight singing at a bar, socially distanced, on a stage, where I was going to do 2 30-minute sets of top 40 pop songs, and they offered to pay me $120 for the 2 sets. That's extremely low. And so I came back to them and asked them if they would pay me $200. If they'd pay me $200 for the 2 sets. $200 is still pretty freaking low, but I said maybe $200 for 2 sets. They canceled on us entirely. I am not working that job tonight. This is what's so freaking frustrating about it, is we are I am on unemployment. I am on unemployment, and social media be damned, I look like I'm doing a whole heck of a lot. I am doing a whole heck of a lot because it's called a hustle, but for everything that I am doing, I am getting way underpaid. And it is infuriating at this point. That restaurant that I was supposed to perform at tonight told me that, well, $120 is all $120 is all that they had in their budget for entertainment for the night. $120. And you know what's sad about it is someone else will go and take that job. But don't ask for people who have spent their whole lives training for this, have degrees in this, have the performance experience, have the credits. You want the caliber? You need to pay for the caliber. For far too long, I disservice myself and go, you know what, fine, I'll make the connection. I need the networking. I want the good standing. But for some restaurant that I don't have any connection to, how dare? Pay your artists. Pay your artists. And I don't even know who I'm speaking to here, but I need to vent.
Damian, how does it feel hearing your monologue thrown back at you?
To be honest, I'm a bit emotional. Sorry, kind of brought me to tears a bit. I joke a lot, and it's all fun and games, right? Like, it's because sometimes you have to joke to get past the seriousness or the heartbreak of it, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't understand why it's so hard to believe. We are people. We're not film and TV actors, which I have nothing against, but a lot of film and TV actors can do 2-year classes and they're on TV, right? They're making a lot more than we are as stage actors, right? But like, we've dedicated our lives. We put our time in. We've gone to school. We've been, training, workshops, like dance classes, voice classes. Like the list goes on. And the money that we get regularly isn't enough to even compensate half the loans that people have taken out to get training. So it baffles me when people try to come with these paychecks that it's like, oh, here, as if this isn't your time and this isn't something that you've committed to. And this isn't like a time that you're taking out of your life to be somewhere and do something, right? This isn't a hobby. It's not a side job, right? And so, to tie it all back in, because I'm all about accountability, and this might step on a few people's toes and stuff, but our union plays a part in that. They play a major part in that. Each year, our salaries are minimally increasing, right? And with those minimally increased salaries, we also have new contracts that allow you to pay actors less. So who cares if the current contracts are being increased if you're going to bring other contracts that allows people to be paid less? Because people will just switch to the ones that are less. And then on top of that, we did some kind of vote last year, and I'm sorry to go off on a rant, but we did some kind of vote like last year or the year before to increase dues and increase percentages that are being taken out of our checks. And it's like, people's arguments were like, well, we haven't really increased in so long. And it's like, we should not increase. We as actors don't have to increase. The pay increases, and the percentage that you get will increase because you increase the pay. But what we're doing right now is when the pay increases, the minimal that it increases, we also increase the percentage that our union takes, which balances out. So the inflation that has been going on, where rent in New York has been going on and rent across the country has been going up, inflation is going and we're still getting paid that same thing. And so it's like, I feel like people have been fed this idea that like, oh, but change hasn't happened in so long and like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, man, you guys have to open your eyes, man. Like, look at the actual paychecks that you're getting. And if you're working, and if you have been consistently working, you can look and see what the check comes out to at the end of the day. If you're working sporadically, it doesn't hit you. But if you've been working consistently, you can look at a paycheck and be like, wait, 6 years ago, I made this and I still walked away with this. Mm-hmm. Now I make this, which seemingly seems more, and I'm still walking away with the same thing that I was walking away with 6 years ago. So, I mean, I feel her. I commend her for speaking out because it is a hard thing to do. There's a lot of naysayers. There's a lot of fear where people think they'll be prosecuted or, or like, just attacked. But at the end of the day, if you don't stand up for yourself, this is just going to continue. So I commend her. Yeah, I commend her. I gave that speech, but I never felt that speech. Like how I feel it when I see, because I felt her pain. I saw someone who was like fighting, doing the best that she can do as a performer, and someone disrespecting her and her talent.
Speaking of talent, my understanding is that you're in Pericles. I'm assuming they're paying you because you did it. I'm assuming.
They're paying well. It's nice. It's a full Zoom production. So we've rehearsed over Zoom. We've teched over Zoom. Tonight is first preview. As you can see, this is like the backdrop. The framing is a little different on Zoom. On Zoom, it cuts off all the extra stuff that you're seeing. But it's a green screen, like the set changes. They've used this new gaming technology called OBS. Yeah. Where it allows them to like manipulate Zoom, where they can change the shapes of the pictures, they can play videos, they can move the screens as videos are playing. There's like a whole stuff that they can do. So the audience is entertained, and it's how do you say? It's engaging to the eye. So it's not just a square box and you're just watching someone talking. But yeah, it's been a great journey, and I've loved it. And I've been honored to be the title character. So, to whom much is given, much is expected, right?
You can feel free to catch Damian Thompson tomorrow. It's opening night. In Pericles, as he plays Pericles.
And it runs until March 7th through the Connecticut Repertory Theater. Just go online, Connecticut Repertory Theater. You will find the information. Catch you there.
Let's talk about who paved the way. So clearly you are aware, before you were the title character of Pericles, we had Mr. Paul Robeson, who was the title character of Othello. Oh. Around that time, he was a member of a group called the Negro Actors Guild, who pushed for more productions like this during that time. Let's talk about it. Before this show, were you even aware of the Negro Actors Guild?
I was not, no.
All right, then let's get to it. Can I get NAG 1? This is the cover page of Jonathan Dewberry, now Dr. Jonathan Dewberry's dissertation titled Black Actors Unite, a call to action. Get it, Dr. Dewberry. The Negro Actors Guild of America, 1937 to 1982. He finished February 1988. So this is the cover page. Can I get NAG 2? In this, Damian, there were a couple of things that stuck out to me. So the Negro Actors Guild was a benevolent organization. That's a little different from a union, and we're going to ask Dr. Dewberry to talk all about that once he comes on. But the Actors Equity Association at the time had released a study, and these were some of their findings. If an actor disagreed with management, he could either accept the situation or go through an expensive lawsuit. That was one. Number 2, there was no limit to free rehearsal periods. So often 6 to 10 weeks without pay, which is a lot more time than what we get now. Also, there were no set paydays. Road shows were frequently stranded, as in actors were stranded in the town if the show didn't do well. Actors furnished their own transportation to the place of opening and from the place of closing. Actors furnished all modern clothes. Layoffs occurred all the time. Can we get NAG 3? So in this, at the time, a lot of Black actors were like, yo, let us in the union, Actors Equity. We need you. We need the representation. Damian, I'm going to read this for you, and I would love to get your response. So this was in the charter of the Actors Equity Association. Well, this was the Actors Association's charter that they submitted to the 4As. April 1932, they also released this in the Equity magazine. Equity's policy has been that when colored performers act in white companies, they come under our jurisdiction and should belong to the AEA. But when they perform in all colored companies, We don't seek their support because their group of people has many problems of which we know nothing, and we have at present no way of learning. As we don't wish to take their dues without giving something in return, we have always felt it would be infinitely better if they were to form a colored branch of equity. Damian, what are your thoughts?
Wow. 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 I mean, wow. The lack of effort in learning is what strikes me the most. Because to say you don't have any way of learning something is, I mean, ludicrous. In a world, in a country like America, at any point, if you want to learn something, you speak to the person. You speak to that thing that you're trying to learn, or that person that you're trying to learn from, or engage yourself in that culture that you're trying to learn, that heritage that you're trying to learn. Not being able to learn something is never an excuse. And to that extent, on the other hand, I kind of commend them in the idea that they don't want to take dues and not represent that group of people in a substantial way. Because I feel like, where we are now, we're not very far from it, because they're taking a lot of dues and there's a lot of statement of, inclusivity, but I don't see a lot of action. I don't see a lot of people being held accountable. One of the things that upsets me the most is when I see those EPA posts that say, oh, looking for people of color, or no discrimination against, black, whites, blah, 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 blah. And you come to the show and it's like, it's an all white show. But you just plaster that blanket statement on every post that you give, which is like, okay, so when am I supposed to actually pay attention to the things that you're actually saying? And when is it lip service? Like, for me, that needs to be looked at. It needs to be kind of like evened out and be like, when that statement is there, it actually needs to mean something. Mm-hmm. So when I go and I see that production, there better be some diversity, mm-hmm. regardless of what that diversity looks like. But it better be something, because that's the post that you put out, right? Or don't. Just own up to what it is. So on the same hand, I commend them for owning up to, what they were intending to do and not faking it, but also disappointed in like, yeah, I mean, come on, like if you wanted to make steps, you could, you just chose not to, which is fine. But know that it's a choice that you made.
This is what I find interesting, even present day, is during COVID, we know that mad actors, just so many performers in general, needed relief. And our government wasn't there. However, the Actors Fund came through. I think they gave grants of $1,200, $1,500. We also had the Episcopal Actors Guild. We have all these other organizations giving relief. Even, what is it? The SBA, Small Business Association, were giving like $1,000 grants, loans that you didn't have to pay back. I feel like that's a grant. They were giving $1,000 that you don't have to pay back. Let's just put it that way, define it whatever you will. But there was all this relief. Back then, without union representation, you could not get that relief. Can I get NAG 4? Benefits for all. Here it is. Dr. Dewberry says, although Theater Authority recognized both the Black artist participation in the benefits of white guilds and their own need for welfare assistance, it could only distribute funds to recognized theatrical organizations. But with the formation of the Negro Actors Guild, which operated along the same lines as the white guilds, Blacks could receive the same sort of benefits. We could take that down. Isn't that wild? How, like, literally for the welfare of the actor and the preservation of the actor, they had to create the Negro Actors Guild. Because, like you just said, the Actors Equity Association and unions of the like, they did not know the history. They did not know the culture. They did not want to know the culture. And they said, do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So that happened. But here's something that I found that was also interesting. Also, I'm just building up Dr. Dewberry right now and being like, this is the premise. Could I get NAG 5, the first board? Because at first I was like, oh, these are Black actors you just don't know. And then I saw that the honorary first president was Bill Bojangles Robinson. Like, this wasn't, and also, like, if you look down a little bit, there's Freddie Washington, who was essentially, she is the incredible executive director that got this off the ground. And a little lower, lo and behold, you had Cab Calloway, the Cab Calloway, as the chairman of the executive board. Other people, Ethel Waters, Marian Anderson, Duke Ellington, Paul Robeson, Louis Armstrong, Wilhelmina Williams, shout out to Wilhelmina Williams, and Walter White, who I believe goes on to, work with the NAACP as their secretary. We could take that down. This is what gets me. Even with those accomplished names, there are awards named after Paul Robeson. How in the world, mind you, I think it was 1980s. Yeah, 1980s that the Negro Actors Guild came to an end. It is 2021. How do we not know,
What can I say? We're in America, where history and the representation of history and the passing down or telling of history has been significantly disproportionately hidden. It's been told in a way where anything that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, not a fact, that everything that is of strength of something that is not necessarily white built or white helped is rarely spoken about and rarely given a platform and rarely being taught. I was having a conversation with a French person of mine, a French friend of mine, and we were just talking about the history, and this person has a PhD in history and politics and all that kind of stuff. And one of the biggest things was, history never lies, right? And I'm like, okay, it never lies in Europe, maybe in Europe, which I still think it does, but maybe it's more truthfully told because you are benefiting from the correct history, right? But in this country, oh no. And then I sent him an article, which is very interesting, about just comparing Texas and California and the school system, and how the exact same topics are told in completely different ways. Where in Texas, most things, I wouldn't say most things that are like African-American related are glossed over or minimalized to a chapter, right? Where in California, it might not be the main thing that's being talked about, but there's at least an extensive discussion on it, right? And those are just 2 states. So I would just be like, I wonder how that history would look if we went from state to state in the 50 states that we have in this country. So it's no surprise that it's not being taught, no. But I think, but this is a thing, I think another thing where I think our union can step up on is like, have us a place on that site, on our Actors Equity site, where you have the history of our union, right? Like of Actors Equity, right? And then you have the history of the affiliated guilds or unions that tied into us in some way, right? Because Actors Equity started in 1918 or something, or
1913.
1913. And then the guild, the Negro Guild started in like 19...
we have 1937.
1937. Yeah. So like, I mean, it's not very far off each other, right? So obviously there's been some correlation from 1937 until it was defunct in the 80s, I think.
Yeah, 1982, 1980. Yep. So this is what I find very interesting. I agree with you. I fully agree. And I said, you know what? I wish as Black people, we were better at just documenting things. And then I immediately ate my words, because can I get NAG 6? Whoop. There it is. It is there. Can I get NAG 7? Not only was it there, but the programs were there. This is not something you can just gloss over. Like, it actively existed. Again, like we showed earlier, Lyndon B. Johnson was compelled to write to these people. We could take this down. So I wonder if that's the next thing we have to do. As you know, we've been working on the Black Theater Matters bill, and we want a history committee to preserve and bring stuff up like this, because it's clear, and it will be even more clear at the end of this episode, that the Negro Actors Guild was very instrumental in the decisions of Actors Equity after their creation and during their very impactful run. But I also want to know, we've worked together in developing Article 9. It's currently Article 9. It might change. We might switch some stuff around for strategic reasons going into the convention. But the Transparency Act, essentially what it's called, the Lift Every Voice Act. I know why it's important, but I was very excited to see how excited you got about working together on this section. Why was it important to you?
Well, I mean, it was important to me because, like a lot of our members, you go through life, you work, you see things that are that you don't agree with, right? And at some point in your life or in your journey, you take a step and you're like, hey, I'm going to try to make some change, right? And that was why I ran. I was like, okay, this is a time, I've been blessed with some free time. So I'm going to take the step and I'm going to try to better our union and better, the state for our fellow actors and members, stage managers included. And during my journey, to be honest, I'd say the first 2 weeks to a month, I was floored. I was shocked. I was agaped. I was stupefied, right? To try to make change in this union, and I'm going to let me look at the camera and say it again. To try to make change in this union is like pushing a 500 rock boulder up a very, very steep hill. Because every inch you take, there is red tape or some kind of reason why you can't know something, why you don't need to know something. Living in a country where we all know that ignorance is what keeps people enchained, ignorance is what keeps people controlled, ignorance is what keeps people divided, ignorance is what gives someone your power that you have. This is the issue in this union. It's the issue in a lot of places, but I'm talking specifically because this is what we're talking about here, and this is what I'm a part of. And this is why I got passionate about the transparency bill. If you choose to serve in a position and you aren't comfortable opening your mouth and hearing and having people hear you and connect your words with who you are, then you don't need to be here. This isn't for you. You're not being paid. There are a lot of theater jobs that will pay less or nothing at all that you can also do. You don't need to be here, right? So if you're putting your time and effort into something that is not paying you, the least that you can do is actually do the job you set out to do and do the job that you said that you are going to do. So asking for certain information, I mean, I understand that there is confidentiality, as in any union, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to see the nitty-gritty things, right? But just common sense things, a bill was up for voting. Certain people voted yes, certain people voted no. Okay, I need to know who voted yes and who voted no, because as a member, when I vote to put someone back into a seat, I want to know if that person actually said what they were going to do. I want to know if that person actually believes what I believe. Because this whole idea of democracy and majority wins, but the majority has to be informed. And so our union is always talking about how is there, we have such a little involvement, like people don't really vote, people aren't really involved in the union. How can we get people involved? Being transparent. That's how you get people involved. Opening and being vulnerable and letting people know what you are doing. Whether they criticize it or not, stand by your word. But if I'm constantly walking by a building that has closed doors or shaded windows, after a while, I'm going to ignore that building, which is what a lot of our members are doing. They're ignoring the union. Because when you try to get involved or learn something, I'm sorry, that's confidential. Oh, no. Well, I don't want to really release that. Well, do we really need to let everybody know? Well, are you accepting everyone's dues? Are they paying into your funds? Then yes, they should know. They need to know. And that's why I got very passionate, because I saw that you can't make any change if you can't see what the actual problem is. And right now we're having a difficult time even seeing what the problems are. We know what they are. We know that things don't work, but we don't know why, because we can't see it.
This year at the convention, I am sad to say, though I am happy that the Black Theater Matters bill did make it through legal review, we had to let 2 articles go, not because these aren't present day issues, but because we couldn't get access to the information we needed to make change. So hopefully next year we'll be able to look at that at the convention. But until then, the only thing we can do is push for transparency. But with that, we're going to be very transparent and crack open this incredible dissertation on the Negro Actors Guild. Can I get the intro video for Dr. Dewberry?
The Negro Actors Guild was formed in 1936 and began operation in 1937 in New York City as a welfare and benevolent organization for Black performers. 23 years after the founding of the Actors Equity Association, and still in the heart of segregation, Black entertainers needed financial aid and community to create success in an industry not built for it. 94 years later, Black entertainers face some of the same issues, and new answers are arising, such as the Black Theater Matters bill. To understand its importance, let's close Black History Month with a dive into Black theater history and learn the story of the Negro Actors Guild and its importance to the labor fight. Here to help guide us is Jonathan Dewberry, PhD, actor and educator currently on the adjunct faculty at New Jersey City University, Keene University, and New York City College of Technology. His extensive New York acting resume include Frederick Douglass, A Dinner at the Table, Waiting for Giovanni, Angela's Justice, The Tempest, Blues for Mr. Charlie, Hamlet, Macbeth, All Kinds of People, and To Kill a Mockingbird. With a PhD in Performance Studies from New York University, his doctoral dissertation was a history of Black Actors Unite, the Negro Actors Guild, 1937 through 1982. He is grateful to be a part of this distinguished panel, and we are honored to have him. Let the lecture begin. Black history awaits.
Dr. Dewberry, I have my iced coffee and I brought my notepad with my paper. I'm ready. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, you have lived. You have lived. What straight up, what inspired you to go, you know what I want to do? I want my dissertation to be on the Negro Actors Guild, and I want it to be over 400 pages. Like, you went in. What inspired that?
Yes. Well, actually, it's interesting you'd ask that, because when I did my defense for the dissertation, that question came up. And what happened was I was new to New York in 1980 at NYU, start my doctorate, and I had gone to a play that was called MMA Pearson, the first colored woman on the air, which was starring Estelle Evans. And I went to see it. And after the show, there was a desk outside that had the Negro Actors Guild. Join Negro Actors Guild. It was like, I didn't know about that. That's interesting. So I went to the desk and I signed up and joined. And at that time, they were located in the Ed Sullivan building on the 6th floor. And that piqued my interest. And as I was starting to think of a topic for my dissertation, it had to be something that was original. I realized there was not anything really on it, and it was in bits and pieces. They had some stuff at Schaumburg, with the New York Public Library at Lincoln Center. They had some stuff. And then at that time, the sort of administrator, a man named Harold Leonard, had introduced me to Dick Campbell, who at that time was the president of the Guild. And he had his own information. And Dick Campbell introduced me to some of the other people like Honey Coles, who was a former president, Rosetta Lenoir, who was part of the Guild previously, Sir James Randolph. So as I got to know them, each person had their own stuff. And then lo and behold, Dick Campbell put me in touch with Freddie Washington. So I spent a whole afternoon in Connecticut, which was like a master class, because she, as they say, she schooled me on the Guild, you know, stuff that was not at Schaumburg, the stuff was not, you know, in the public library. So then I had to sort of basically put it all together with the bits and pieces and get these people, because there was, you know, some tension in the Guild, because this was like the 80s. And by this point, it was unraveling. So some people were not speaking to each other. So I had to negotiate personalities and get access to these people, plus to share the oral history. Because, I mean, we're talking about Honey Coles, you know, old school Hoofer, you know, Sir James Randolph, you know, Dick Campbell goes back to like the 1930s with Hot Chocolates, you know, on Broadway. And so it was this rich history, not to mention Freddie Washington, our first authentic Piola, Invitation of Life. So that's what sort of got me going. And then as I started to sort of read more and more, it was like, wow, this story needs to be told because no one knows. And it took off from there.
It's funny that you brought up Imitation of Life, because it's what is it? I call it the grandma lead-in. Whenever you say you want to be an actor, it's like, oh, you want to be an actor? Have you ever seen Imitation of Life? And I never forget when I was forced to watch that movie, and I was sitting there like this black and white thing. What is this? Until that actress goes back after, you know, after the mother has died. Spoiler alert for everyone watching. The mom dies, and then you have this passing daughter who just rejected being black. And then she turns around and has that moment of regret when her mom is being put into the grave of not accepting her heritage. And I said, oh, I get this. This is everything. And then it turns out it's part of the Marvel universe. Sorry, I spoiled it. But no, joking. It's not. It's not part of the Marvel universe.
Yes.
But here's something I would like to do, if it's okay with you, Dr. Dewberry. I would like to break in almost as if we're doing a 3 a.m. infomercial, because I hope everyone runs out and buys this dissertation. But is it okay if we take parts of this and get your insight?
Yes. Yes, by all means. Mm-hmm.
Let's start with, can I get NAG 8, $100? So on page 72, I found that you wrote this. When NAG experienced financial difficulties in 1939, this is 2 years after they were created. For example, Actors Equity assisted with a $100 donation, a substantial sum during the Depression years. You go on to say, even though the Guild functioned mainly as a benevolent organization, it also assisted the Black actor in his contract negotiations with the producers, as well as securing opportunities for Blacks in the entertainment industry. last thing you said that really stuck out to me was, while it may not have directly carried out union activities, as for example did Actors Equity, the Guild educated the Black actor in the business of theater. My first question is, can you really break down the difference between a union and a benevolent organization?
Well, the benevolent organization is designed for financial support only, the welfare of the actors. And all the other actors, pretty much all of them, had their own union. The Italian actors, the Hebrew actors, Greek actors, everybody had their own union except the Negro actors. And what it was is that, in 1936, Freddie Washington and Noble Sissle, and these artists who were like the prominent artists of the period got together in Harlem and said, we've got to establish something of our own, because this had been going on for years. Because one thing that Dick Campbell talked to me about was they would have what were called these midnight shows. So after the Broadway shows were done, right, at midnight, all the actors converged, let's say at the Imperial Theater, and put on a benefit to raise money for that guild. So the Episcopal Actors Guild, Hebrew Actors Guild, whatever. And a lot of the Black actors, Bill Robinson, Ethel Waters, Noble Sissle, were participants, right? And in my dissertation, you can see where in the Negro Actors Guild, once it was established, they had their own benefits. You saw a lot of actors like A. Cantor, Fanny Brice, who were now supporting the Negro Actors Guild and, participating in their benefits, to help them raise money for their funds. So it was pretty much the welfare, and their charter specifically stated it was for the welfare of, was they at the time, Negro actors, as opposed to union activities, because you did have Actors Equity, which was sort of recognized sort of bargaining union. Now, it's interesting that in my dissertation, in the earlier chapters, in the early 1920s, there was the Colored Actors Union. So there was an attempt to create in Harlem, once again, a bargaining union for Black actors, but it just didn't survive, financially, organization-wise. So the fact that the Guild was set up to address those needs specifically, and that was a distinction that was always maintained. But as we all know, that you can't, the color of your skin speaks for itself. So you couldn't help but get involved. So you had a number of, who later on became prominent performers, who came through the Guild. I don't know if it would, if it would be proper to sort of call them out, but we're talking about some pioneers.
Wait, time's out. Dr. Dewberry, I'm just going to set you up for it. So can I get NAG 9, Lena Horne?
Yes.
So in this, you point out that the Guild was responsible for the young Lena Horne's comeback. Married, frustrated, and living in Pittsburgh. I feel like living in Pittsburgh was the actual shade of that sentence. Horne decided to return to show business. Washington conferred with a Mr. Gum, a theatrical agent and lawyer. That's Freddie Washington, the Queen Bee who you interviewed, who secured an audition for Horne. She had no money. She had no money to come to New York for the audition. However, the Guild paid her fare.
Yes.
Can we pull that down? Talk about it. Lena Horne, if you believe.
Yeah, because, as we know, she had a career, but then when she got married, and she sort of became, the housewife. But when her marriage, was falling apart and she wanted to resume her career, she was in Pittsburgh, and she didn't have, enough funds to get to New York for audition, to meet, with an agent. So the Guild you know, provided her the fare, right? And that came directly from Freddie Washington in terms of her. And you had a number of, in the midst of, in New York City, New York State, the racism when it came to getting a house. The Guild was, important to help provide housing for these actors who were here in New York, to get them a room, to get them transportation, to get to and from auditions. Just very much, meat and potatoes survival in the city, which otherwise they would not have had, because there was no, unemployment or workman's compensation. So it was depending on the kindness of strangers that really sort of kept them afloat. But so that was and Lena Horne was just one of these people. But you had here again with Freddie Washington and with Dick Campbell, Sidney Poitier. When he first came here, he was struggling with Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee when they were trying to find, get the funding, the down payment for their house in upstate New York. That kind of assistance that the Guild, if not directly giving them funds, putting them in touch with the right people, so that they had a networking vehicle to look out for, Black actors. So they definitely served a crucial role in that purpose, in that regard. Yes.
Here's what I found really interesting. So in crafting the Black Theater Matters bill with so many delegates and so many people across the Americas, what I found very interesting was that when I started reading your dissertation, there were parallels. Could I get NAG 10? SAG, SMs, and refugees. These were some of the key things that they did. The Guild worked with other benevolent organizations such as the Negroes People's Committee to aid Spanish refugees. Now, there is an article which we're working through right now in which we're essentially saying we got to be better when it comes to immigration, immigrants, and people who are not from America who want to join the union. I also saw the issue, you go on to say, the issue also included an announcement about the formation of the Screen Actors Guild. Now, this is what's funny to me about this. We could take this down and then we're just going to bring it back up as I tell this story. Screen Actors Guild created because when the Actors Equity Association went to Hollywood, they went screen, television, no, this is below us. And two actors went, no, I think it's above us. So they went and they created the Screen Actors Guild, which has become the behemoth in entertainment that it is today. It is now SAG-AFTRA. Can we bring NAG 10 back up? You go on to talk about how, again, this struggling little union, SAG was still struggling to establish itself in the industry, and the article encouraged NAG members to support the Screen Actors Guild by making sure that their next movie deal was made under a SAG agreement with producers. Lastly, which I also found really funny, another major article in the November issue of the NAG magazine paper was the issue concerning a Black stage manager. The Guild was not focused exclusively on the Black actor. It also included Black stage managers and other Black technical theater people.
Yes.
Why do you think that was the case?
Well, it's an artist is an artist. And you had people, I remember when I here again first came to New York, I was studying and singing, all right, as a soloist with a Black harpist whose name was Dorothy Chakrabarti. And she had, when I told her about my dissertation, she was saying that, as a struggling, concert harpist, she had utilized the Guild for support and assistance.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't just actors, but wherever there was a need, with costumers, makeup artists, which are few and far between. And as we know that if you thought Hollywood had a problem trying to deal with Lena Horne's skin color and do her hair and all those things. You can imagine with Broadway, doing, Porgy and Bess. And it's like, well, what kind of, wig or makeup? How do we sort of, do these people? Because, most of those makeup artists had very little experience working with people of color. So that aspect in terms of whatever that need was, they were there. So yes, it didn't have to be the Black actor. It could have been the stage manager, the costumer, producing your own stuff with producers, writers. Langston Hughes' name, it came up. Richard Wright came up in turn. Lorraine Hansberry, obviously, is playwright. So yeah, so they were engaged, and it was called the Negro Actors Guild, but it was across the board. Not to mention, in fact, before we had AFTRA, the radio performers, because we know radio was big in the 30s and 1940s. So when it comes to announcers, engineers, who were trying to, get work, produce their own shows, or as is happening now, as both you and Damian had addressed, trying to address, Black issues that affected, racism, segregation. So this kind of, support. And I think that's why you found that, because the Guild attracted musicians, artists, writers, technical people, as well as, directors and actors and singers, everybody realized its significance, that here's something that can help promote our story and tell our story, and something that's for us, that represents us. And it's inclusive in working, not just, in a vacuum, but working with, at that time, a young Screen Actors Guild, a young AFTRA, before equity even sort of got involved with the issue of working in segregated theaters. Now, we're talking about issues today with COVID and the pandemic. Imagine you are a Black performer and you are doing a production of St. Joan starring Ingrid Bergman at the National Theater in Washington, D.C. Now, you can be on the stage, but you couldn't sit in the audience. But this is a, union house. And if you wanted to work, this is what you had to do. But when you had these performers who were saying, now, even though we're limited in our scope because of the charter as a benevolent organization, you had these other committees and groups that arose from the Guild as a separate entity, like the Coordinating Committee for Negro Performers, which arose like in the 50s to address issues like television, lack of representation. So they, led the boycotts and the pickets and went down to NBC and CBS and said, hello, we're here. All right, we watch television.
Wait,
right?
Damian, just to set you up, Dr. Dewberry, just to set you up, Damian, there was literally a pamphlet that Dr. Dewberry talks about in which they were passing out being like, have you seen a Negro on TV today?
I'm laughing because you're talking about the 1950s and it is 2021 and here we are still talking about the same thing. Have you seen one?
And then it was a certain type, because as we know, for Lena Horne, she was fair. All right. So even for Hollywood, and in some cases, even, here in New York, it's like when you say, I'm going to use a Black performer, does it always have to be the one who's lightest, right? With long hair, right? So it's like there's more to us. We run the wide spectrum here. So there was also that to deal with. And when you have, people who were not fitting that norm, like a Diana Sands, right? Like a Cicely Tyson,
Yeah.
right? Who didn't fit that norm, right? A Rosalind Cash, right? Who at a certain point, her and Cicely Tyson were like, you know what? I'm tired of wearing this wig. I'm going to wear my hair. And what happened? Rosalind Cash did not work in any film. When she decided to do that, it's like, okay, she didn't work in television. She worked in stage. But, here's the person, and we think, oh, dreadlocks. Oh, that's no big deal. It was a big deal. Right? When Rosalind Cash did it. When Cicely Tyson walked out with a bald head, that was a big deal. So that, for most of us, we had to adhere to the norm. Comb that hair, put that wig on, and get work and play the role. So all these aspects, it's like trying to cover all that. You couldn't just stay in one lane. You had to sort of broaden out your scope and go where the need was. But you had, organizations that the Guild in many ways educated, like the AFL-CIO, right? Because here again, the Guild was benevolent. The AFL-CIO was the labor organization. But when you're talking about, segregation, racism, discrimination, you're going to get in the same lane at some point. So it makes sense that here's Fred O'Neill, who becomes, president of Actors Equity, then of the 4 A's, right? And you're right, it's no accident, it's no coincidence, because he sort of started to, he set the stage to break the bar.
Well, in 1951, he was the one that found the CCP, right? CCMP.
Yes. So, and here's someone who was, Negro Actors Guild. At the same time, we need something not to jeopardize the charter of the Guild, to go out and do the work, the marching, the picketing, the boycotting, right? A lot of things that for the younger artists of this generation, they don't know about. I mean, I've had some of my colleagues who are doing, a reading about Oscar Michaud, and they have no idea who this man was. They have no idea who Edna Thomas was. So it's like, well, how are you doing the show if you don't realize who these people are and their significance? But you know what that means, right? That, our first film was not Birth of a Nation. It was not D.W. Griffith. Oscar Michaud was there. The Lincoln Theater Company was there. So the fact that, the Guild, because you have these artists who are celebrating our history, our culture, looking out for each other, literally, but also, socially, making sure that, we were getting our due, making sure that we were at the table.
Wait, speaking of at the table, we have a question from the audience. We have a queen in our midst, one of the leaders of the intimacy movement. So essentially, there's this new movement, Dr. Dewberry, where we're getting intimacy directors for stage, intimacy coordinators for film and TV. One of the people leading the charge is a woman named Ann James, who I got to speak to yesterday on Clubhouse and was just like, I got my life. But she has a question for us. Can we pull up Ann James? Thank you for this lesson. I'm imagining that's how she said it. In my heart, that's how Ann James said it. How can I find the recording? So I'm assuming, how can we find the information and everything? One quick, of course, Ann and anyone listening, get Dr. Dewberry's dissertation. But where can people also go?
Well, you have the, at NYU, they have their archives of the dissertation. Once I have put together, all this material, we were looking for a housing. And believe it or not, Schaumburg at this point didn't have all the information. They had some of it, but not as much that I was able to get access to in terms of having these people like Dick Campbell and Freddie Washington and Ernestine Anderson and Harold Leonard, who donated all of this. So now Schomburg has it, finally. It was like, how can we have this, library of, early Black theater and, benevolent activity, and no one knows about it, and it's not housed anywhere. So Schomburg, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem, is a resource. The NYU archives, which is where the dissertation is, housed and there for prosperity.
Have you thought about publicizing your dissertation, like publishing it?
I did initially, but I ran into some challenges in terms of getting approval from the estates, because when it was completed, right? And I was trying to, send out like publishing feelers. Then now we have to deal with estates of people, like Honey Cole's estate, Dick Campbell estate. So they, want approval of whether they were giving me the right to release the tapes that I had made, that I'd done, and all of that. So then it became like a much more longer, drawn out process than I expected. And then time passes. I was getting involved in other things and activities, but it's something that, I would just love to revisit, because at a point I felt, oh, well, it's kind of old, but then looking back on it and, in reflection is like, but it's that point is relevant, that people need to know that. The more I see, particularly the up and coming, the young generation who don't know about this, right? I have, younger colleagues of mine who barely know who, Dorothy Dandridge, who have no idea who Canada Lee was, as the first Black actor to play a white man on Broadway in The Duchess of Malfi, which was a big deal, like an Ebony magazine and all of this. No one knows that history. So they don't know the journey, and they don't know why I have such strong opinions in terms of our portrayals in media, in film, in television. And it's like, where's that coming from? It's like, well, you need to understand this history that we've come through, right? To see why, we need to, make some choices here, right? We can't just, yes, we want to work, but you really want to take on that role when, you see, wow, this is kind of, one-dimensional. It's kind of degrading. It's not really, is this like buffoonery?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you're getting paid for it. You're being paid good money for it. And it's like, you realize the history. This is what they tried to do with Freddie Washington, right? Now, here she was, this, very fair. You talk about light-skinned Black woman, right? When I got off the train, because she met me in Stamford, Connecticut, and I got off the train, I'm looking for, a Black woman. It's like, who's this light-skinned white woman coming up to me? It's like, that's Freddie Washington. It's like, oh, but it's like amazing, because she could have passed if she chose to, right? She had the light eyes, the very fair skin, and with what she went through with Imitation of Life in 1934, right? That's a masterclass, because, they told her to her face, if you, willing to pass, you could, do a whole lot more in Hollywood, but she opened up her mouth the minute she said, I don't think so. I'm a Black woman, right? And people kept, sort of pushing the envelope to say, well, you really could do this. And it's like, yeah, I could, but that's not me. So, right, she didn't, stay in Hollywood very long. But, that's a testament when we look at, all of those who came after her, the Halle Berrys, all right, the Diane Carrolls, Cicely Tyson, Diana Ross, who come after her, Vanessa Williams, and some face the same similar kinds of, limitations or perceptions in terms of how we want you to be seen. Oh, that's too ethnic. Oh, or that's too ghetto, or that's too black. We want you to be more marketable and more, mainstream. So don't make it so, blackish, to use that term. So,
which is the exact opposite of what they're asking for now, which is very interesting.
Yeah. So
now, we want the stereotype.
Yeah.
Please be the, you're like, I'm not like that though.
Or they get someone like, Sidney Poitier, and it's like, well, he's like part of the old school. But it's like, no, you need to go back and you need to see, right? You need to see the defiant ones. You need to see No Way Out. You need to see what this meant in terms of, oh, here's the black, he's not shuffling. He's not somebody's chauffeur. Oh, he's speaking up, right? He actually slapped a white man back in the heat of the night. He slapped a white woman back in the patch of blue. I mean, this was tremendous for Black people. He fought back. He said something. He spoke up. He didn't just shuffle off, and it's like that is significant, right? Yes, it had its own issues in terms of, the limitations of not making him too sexual, right? In terms of the roles that he played, but still he was there. Harry Belafonte was there. James Earl Jones was there. So, without these people, we don't understand the history, and we tend to make the same mistakes and find ourselves in the same boat in 2021, unless we look at that history and say, okay, now I know what I need to know, and not just for us. And this is why, even for Actors Equity, but the things that I had brought, even Actors Equity was like, well, we didn't know that. It's like, this is in your own archives. How can you not know this, right? A screen actor, how could you not know this? And it's like, you had to, because people like Al Jolson, who sort of built his career on imitating Black people, right? And all this blackface, which was the whole minstrelsy craze, that these artists knew. They knew the deal was going on. Fred Astaire opened for Bill Robinson in vaudeville. But look how the tables switched. Fred Astaire goes to Hollywood. Bill Robinson, plays the dance captain, and which is really what his role was, because when he came to Hollywood, keep in mind, he was like almost 40 years old when he came to Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. Around the same age as Fred Astaire, right? But Fred Astaire, because of the opportunity, he's white, right? He's getting all this opportunity, but the history behind, what Bill Robinson did, all those, the white tap dancers who didn't really know real tap until he came to Hollywood, and he trained people like, Ann Miller and influenced them, right? Or you had John Bubbles. These were all people who were in New York initially, right? Who had gone out to LA. But here's someone who was, he tapped, he danced so fast, and they tried to, with Fred Astaire in his movies, he tried to copy John Bubbles, but because it was too fast, he couldn't keep up. So they would slow down the film, mm-hmm. so that Fred Astaire could adapt it and make it his own, right? Because John Bubbles was doing it like this, right? He was all over the place. and you couldn't keep up. But this is the kind of history that we've had. So when you talk about people who borrowed from our culture, right, and what they've used from us, and this is something here again, Freddie Washington, had sort of schooled me on. When you look at, there was a film called Pinky that came out in the 1940s with Ethel Waters and Jean Crane. Now, Jean Crane plays the woman who could pass for white, or she was the white actress. But that role would have been a Freddie Washington role had she agreed to play ball, right? But the issue was, in the film, Pinky has a white love interest and they have a kiss. So Hollywood said, oh no, South will burn down the theater if we put this in here. So we can't have Freddie Washington. No, get Jean Crane, have her do it. Right? So when Freddie Washington saw that and saying, wow, and they were saying, well, we're going to teach you how to do film. Her thing was, I've been on the stage in New York, right, for quite some time. You can teach me something about film technique, but I'm an actress. You can't teach me how to act. So here's someone who came in already quite confident and comfortable with herself. And because of that, it was like, you know what? If you're not going to play ball, we can't use you. And she said, okay, where's the exit? I'm going back to New York. I'm going to work on my terms, on my stage, right? And the cost for that, as you mentioned, Damian, about, people being afraid to speak up. When she spoke up and she went back to New York, and she was very close to Paul Robeson, as was Lena Horne, and he was blacklisted in the 50s, where they took his passport away and he could not work in any theater, right, in the country, right? They were threatened, if you hire this man, we're coming after you. So the only place Paul Robeson could perform and make money to support his family and earn a living was the Black church. That was the only place. And Freddie Washington, because she was associated with Paul Robeson, they blacklisted her. But see, that's a Hollywood thing, because New York was like, well, we're about the theater. So if you want to work here, you can work here. So we had so many actors who came from Hollywood who worked in New York because they were blacklisted in Hollywood. So Freddie Washington, she made a living, but she also spoke her mind. Because that's who she was, and it's like, in doing that, the cost is, okay, then you're not going to be, a headliner. You're not going to be the superstar. Can you live with that? And her thing was, yes, because I'm doing what I love to do. So,
all right, I'm going to set us up for one of our two big discussions. If we don't make it to the second one, that's okay. But at the end of your dissertation, you almost give a warning. Could I get NAG 15? NAG 15. All right. In NAG 15, you write, the year 1978, however, marked a disastrous turning point for the Guild. In that year, all of its problems seemed to come to a head. Some of the dissension within the Guild was outlined by Ken Freeman and Ernestine Allen. Freeman had been a Guild member since the 1940s, and he felt that the Guild's progress forward was threatened by the influx of new members who joined in the 1970s, who wanted to take the Guild in another direction. He's quoted as saying, when these new folks came in, they wanted to change everything, especially our name. They brought up this Black business. They wanted to call it the Black Actors Guild, but there is no such thing as Black. Negro is a race. What is Black? For over 30 years, it was the Negro Actors Guild, and these other folks wanted to come in and change everything overnight. Can I get NAG 16? And in this one, you go on to say, when asked about the reasons behind the Guild's demise, many of the NAG members interviewed echoed the same thought. It was a clash between old and new members, resulting in jealousy, bickering, and finally chaos. You could take that down. You go on to say some of the key factors being when they ran their elections, there were slates that caused division. There was the name change. There was legal issues of infighting. There was the lack of understanding of history. There was greed. And then there was a power struggle for the executive board, as in people fighting for that executive position as opposed to, securing auditions and working that route.
Yes.
What's your take on that? And what should people observe in these kind of traps moving forward with a guild or a union?
I think you kind of echoed it, strangely enough, as you were talking, you and Damian, transparency. Because at its height, like the 1940s and 1950s with the Guild, they were getting a lot of support, right? Up to the 1960s, right? When they had their big, like, silver anniversary, golden anniversary and all of this. And they were getting hype from, President Johnson, at the time, and the state of New York had a proclamation, for them, the Negro Actors Guild. They're getting all this attention. They're getting a lot of money from performers who are donating money. Because with the Guild, it wasn't like a loan. These were, you gave out money. You needed it, here it is, right? So it wasn't like you pay this back. So people on their own, gave money, to support the Guild. And I think some people came in, just saw the money, the financial aspect. Oh, this is a nonprofit, organization, and they have all this money and all of this, and the history part got lost. Plus, I think, as I said in the dissertation, you have this clash of the old and the new, the semantics of Negro Actors Guild or Black actors. Why are you fighting? It's the same thing. The goals, they remain the same in 1978 as they were in 1937. So why are you bickering over semantics? So I think you had that, that the older people felt somehow left out, left behind. The younger people didn't feel their voice was being heard. Right? It is parallel to the civil rights movement with Dr. King and SNCC, and the Malcolm X, and all of these things start to happen, right? When people start to say, well, we're tired of doing it this way, let's do it this way, right? And they want to sort of go off on their own. And I think that's the danger when, there has to be communication, a balance of recognizing the contributions of the past. When you have someone say, well, Lena Horne, that's old stuff. I got to where I am because of me. Not because of Lena Horne, not because of Dorothy Dandridge. I got here because of me. And then you realize, I find that I'm having some difficulty with my finances. I have some difficulty with trying to do the kind of work I want to do. Oh, just like Lena Horne. Interesting. Just like Dorothy Dandridge. So much for that. So this idea of saying, there's nothing that you can teach me from the past is false. That's misleading. And that keeps the younger people in ignorance with the lack of knowledge. And I think for the older people, it's going with the change. Just like, back then in the 50s, when you had this tension of, how do we deal with segregation in these theaters? How do we deal with the racism, in New York with the Broadway shows? So yeah, these organizations grew out of that, the CCNP, the CNA, because there was a need to say, okay, we need to expand. Now, the Guild is still relevant in terms of welfare, but we need to get into issues politically and socially. If we can't do that with the red tape of, well, you only be geared towards benevolent, then we need to sort of branch off. And these organizations, I mean, they had their own charter. They had their own, rules of governance, but the members were pretty much the same people, just under a different heading, but they were still moving towards that same goal, right? Of opening up opportunities, making it equal, making it accessible. So I think that on both ends, there needs to be more open lines of communication and acknowledgement of our past, and using that to see, okay, where do we go from here? Because what I'm seeing a lot, and what frustrates me, is that we kind of are making the same mistakes, right? And if, that's insanity, to keep doing the same thing the same way and expect to see something different, that's insanity. So yes, there needs to be change. There needs to be acknowledgement of, in the past, the ball was dropped, or some certain things were not done as effectively, but it's a learning process. It's a journey. So let's just change it. That's what it's there for. Let's just change it and fix it and go in this direction, right? And I think here again, it parallels the civil rights movement. And it's no fault that all of these types of, shifts sort of go down the same path, right? Once the Guild, you started getting this heavy influx of younger people coming to New York in the 70s who didn't know the history. All they saw was this title, Negro Actors Guild. What about Black actors? So that became a distraction for them. They didn't, look at that history, right, of these performers who had gone before. And I think that created, this gap. And then the older people, as I said, were seeing these young people as, they don't respect me. They don't think I have anything to offer. You know what? Forget them. I'm going to, do my own thing. So much so that when I, knew of the Guild, when I first came across them, right, in like 1981 or so, actually, as I later found out, there were two guilds operating at the same time, right? One was the one that was there at MMA Pearson, first couple on the air, and the other was kind of like operating like in dissension. Mm-hmm. They were the ones who were suing the other people, which I later found out. And it's like, how old are we? What we're arguing and bickering, and it's what? And in the end, who's losing out? Plus, I think it has to do with purpose. I think once Actors Equity began to step up, and the Screen Actors Guild began to step up and take a more active role, then the Guild felt like, well, our role, what is that going to be? What's that going to look like, right? Interestingly enough, you still have the Episcopal Actors Guild. You still have the Hebrew Actors Guild, but there was no Negro Actors Guild. And all these members have gone on and passed on. And there is no real interest or need to see that kind of connection. And I think it's so important today because just economically, when I first came to New York, I could get an apartment in Brooklyn for $350 a month, right? Railwood apartment. Today, coming to New York, to be the actor, the artist, you got to have about 4 roommates to survive, with rent. Everything is going up. So you need support, you need help. And if you're not in the union, then what? You just got here. You're not in the union, right? Maybe you've done some, non-union work, all of that, but you're not in the union yet. So what about those people, right? Just like now with this pandemic, at least if you're on Broadway, you have the union, you have unemployment, you have a recognized bargaining unit for you. But what about all those actors off Broadway, going from show to show, and you just get a paycheck? There are no health benefits, unemployment. They can't go to equity. I was going to say, well, where's your contract? Let's see where you worked.
No, they're going to say, where are your dues? We need you to still pay your dues during the pandemic.
I'm going to help you.
I'm going to give us a commercial break. Damian, I know you had something to say. I actually want to give you the final word. So really think that through while we have Delegate Maria Cristina Posada Sly give us the Sly comment of the week.
Hey friends, Maria Cristina here again with some more super fucking fun facts. So today we're going to talk about retaliation, punishment for speaking up about sexual harassment. Retaliation can occur after someone opposes sexual harassment, reports or files a complaint of sexual harassment, or participates in an investigation of sexual harassment. Examples may include firing, denial of a promotion, threats, negative performance reviews, change in scheduling, exclusion from meetings, etc. Retaliation is in fact illegal, and yet still happens every goddamn day.
Hold up. I never saw that video. I didn't know it was going to end like that. Maria Cristina Posada Sly work. Dr. Dewberry, I want to thank you for coming. I don't want you to say another word because I want everyone listening to like, subscribe, share this, but make sure you get this dissertation. It is, when I saw the page number being over 400 pages, like I told you a little bit earlier, this is the first time I got to meet Dr. Dewberry. I was like, oh, here we go. It's the Obama book all over again. But when I tell you, I sat down and I said, this is what I'll be reading for the rest of the night until 4 a.m. because it was that good. As one of the final members of the Negro Actors Guild, as we learned today, I think you deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award of some kind because you have found a way to preserve that legacy. You've done it.
Yeah. So do we get a copy when we go to the no how do you read it? Or do you have to read it there? I'm just asking.
You can order it online. You could literally get the copy of Dr. Dewberry's dissertation.
So do you get a personal copy, or do you get to rent it and then have to return it after?
You get to keep it.
Okay. Yeah. Listen, I've never had the privilege of reading a dissertation like that someone else has written that wasn't in like a book or something, right?
It's glorious. Yeah. Damian, give me that final thought, because when your eyes lit up, I said, he's going to say it.
Yeah,
Take us out.
Well, this is, it's interesting, Dr. Dewberry, you spoke about the history, right? And the younger generation not wanting to know that history, right? But and I get that. But I think a part of it is also when you are in a system that the history that is being taught to you is negative, depressing, uninspiring. Like, I don't walk out, feeling like, oh my God, I was George Washington and I freed slaves and I'm so cool. Like, I don't walk out feeling, I walk out feeling like, oh my God, I was one of the slave people that was like doing my job, like always. And even when they were sick, I still took care of them. And oh my God, they let me free. I'm so happy. Like that's, so it's like, I get that. And I get the connection to that word, Negro versus Black, right? Just based on what they were being fed. And so I think in support of what you said, I think having ways that we can educate and share that rich knowledge of Black America, right? Of Negro America, right? Is I think how we're going to grow, grow as a group of people, because the way that things are going now, the history that's being taught, it's the movies that we see, we choose 3 to 4 people that we think are cool, and then we tell that story over and over and over again. It always includes some kind of slavery thing or blah, blah, but like there's so many names that you have mentioned today, which I'm so grateful that you did, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't know, right? Some of the information I knew, some of which I didn't know, but I was excited to be like, God, there's so many rich stories that could be told on stage in Hollywood. Why are we constantly telling this oppressive story, you know? So I think getting that kind of way, which is why I asked, and I'm begging you as a fellow person of color, find a way to publicize that. Find a way to publish it.
I will. Yeah.
The more people that get their hands on that knowledge is the more people that can put it in the hands of people that can make it accessible to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make the films, make the, you know, things like that. But yes, I thank you for coming and sharing that knowledge. I am more informed and more inspired because of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the three of us are going to talk backstage a little bit after, but for everyone that is being like, you know what, I'm fired up. What can I do later today? At 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we have on Clubhouse exclusively the Black Masculinity Town Hall, sponsored by the Black Theater Caucus and the Hearing Place. We have Jason Vesey, who I just love as a writer. I think he's great. Also, that writing's wrong. Yeah, we got to fix that. Jawan Jackson, Mr. Broadway, and also an owner of some pretty nice suits. Sir Brock Warren, who I got to work with doing a production of Oklahoma. Sir Brock is the truth. He's Sir Truth. And then we have Anthony Wayne, who is just revolutionizing the way we think about being an advocate and an actor. Also, if you're like, you know what, I want something else. At 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, The Collaborative is celebrating the legal review and the creation of the Black Theater Matters bill. And we're talking about, just like the Negro Actors Guild, The Collaborative is kind of the Los Angeles version of that. They are doing that exact work with the group of artists that they have on their roster. And we're celebrating the idea, and it's in the Black Theater Matters bill, of the equity spectrums, a whole new way to think about diversity that is based on demographics and statistics. You can take that down. Y'all, thank you for coming. Let's get into these rooms and start sharing this history. We're out.